Hello and welcome to episode 151 of the NOTCAST. I am not going to be doing an episode about oldie monster claws today, despite the fact I'm holding one here in this packet. I'm really looking forward to eating these later. That will be my reward at the end of this. Today, instead, I'm going to be talking about something else. These will become relevant later on, and I'm sure you can guess where and when. Today, I am going to be talking about a band and an artist who I'm pretty sure you know I really, really like, whose music I really, really enjoy. Today, I am going to be talking about the post-New Order career of the band's former bass player, Peter Hook, and his band, The Light. And first and foremost, I think what I've got to say is it can get quite controversial talking about this. Emotions can run quite high. There are a number of people that are of the belief that no Hooky, no New Order. But I'm of the belief that, in fact, now we've got two acts that play a very beloved set of songs live on a very frequent basis. And there is two trains of thought around this, one of which is that New Order are bastards, and the other one is that can't they all just get along, really, I suppose, would probably be. And my perspective is to try and walk that very thin line on the fence between the two. In the interest of full transparency, I am one of the so-called keyboard warriors that when Peter Hook first posited the idea of forming a band and playing the Joy Division albums in full live on stage, I thought, that's a really bad idea. It's still an idea that I don't necessarily fully subscribe to, but I've come to warm to the fact that he's out there playing songs that he clearly loves and has had a big role in building over the past 40 or so years and plying his trade. And I certainly wouldn't want him or anybody related to the band to not be able to ply their trade. When Peter left the group in 2007, it was quite public. It got quite messy. There were accusations that were flung around various corners of the internet and news interviews and things like that. And Peter was very vocal about his displeasure with both what happened with New Order when he was in the band and when he wasn't in the band. And as I've mentioned in a previous episode, when New Order reformed without him in 2011, and played the Troxy and a number of other venues in 2012 as well. They did so by forming a new company called New Order Now, which apparently happened on a day when Hooky was touring in China. And apparently, according to the legal papers, which I've heard a little bit about, they chose that particular date to make sure that he was absolutely out of the country on the day and so couldn't possibly contest it. My point of view is, if you have a former member of the group who's quite vocal about the fact that he doesn't want to work with you ever again and has said a number of unpleasant things in the press, he wouldn't necessarily be your first choice for bass player, because you would kind of think, well, he doesn't want to play with us, he's left the group, it's quite clear he's quite unhappy, we wouldn't necessarily want to have him back in the band. And now I'm not taking sides around that. It's an understandable position. His point of view as well, Hooky's point of view is, well, why didn't they call me? Very understandable as well. It's probably the empathy as you end up sitting on the fence so far. The spike gets driven up your backside, which is terrible. The first thing which I think I'm going to mention is the first and most obvious creative outlet which there was after he left the group. He formed a band called Freebase, which comprised of three bass players, being Andy Rourke, Manny from the Stone Roses, and obviously Hooky himself, and released an EP and the album It's a Beautiful Life. Freebase did not last long in the world. I think practically they split up pretty much as soon as they released their debut album, and I've got to be really honest about it, I barely listened to this record. If you're a fan of it, all power to you, but there are very, very few bands which I've listened to and thought, I really want to like them. And I think I've got to be blunt about it. The singer, I don't like the singer in Freebase. There are very, very few acts I've heard where the vocalist and their vocal choices, their melodic choices, the sound of their voice and the lyrics that they choose, to me just doesn't fit with the music at all. I listen to it and I've not heard a band where it's been so obvious in my ears a mismatch. as freebase. The UK version of the album is a double CD, and it contains an instrumental version. The instrumental version, really, really like it. I think it's really good, really promising, but the vocal version, not so much. There was also an EP that's physically released called the Two Worlds Collide EP. It features vocals by Tim Burgess, Pete Wiley, Howard Marks, and Hooky himself on Live Tomorrow, You Go Down. I much prefer this because it sounds more like the classic sound that you would necessarily expect. The band split up quite soon after they released their first album. I think there were some tweets that were going around accusing Hooky of grave robbing and things like that, which was a stronger word than I would use. But as Hooky's lawyer said to himself, said you need a 24-hour delay button when you hit send tweet, because that gets you into trouble. He said some things in the press which were understandably annoyed, I think it's fair to say. And in 2011, he said Bernard's a twat and always has been. Later called him El Twatto. And one of the news articles also featured the headline, I'm going to fuck New Order over. And when you say things like that in the press, it's not completely alien that they wouldn't ring you up and ask you to be their bass player. Difficult position, really is. Completely sympathetic to both of them. But the way in which things have been done, the way that people have said certain things, I mean, like, this is very confrontational, and it's probably not going to go the way that you want it to. So, around about the same time, 2009 to 2011, obviously Bernard, Stephen and Phil had their post-New Order band Bad Lieutenant that lasted for one album, which I talked about in a previous episode. They were touring, they were playing normally about 3 Joy Division songs, 4 New Order songs, as well as an album, or most of an album of their own new material. And then in May 2010, the 30th anniversary of Ian Curtis's death, Hooky launched his first new band, The Light, and played Joy Division material exclusively, nothing but Joy Division songs at some shows, and then started touring as a celebration of Joy Division. Now, from my perspective, I think Joy Division on stage, very, very different to Joy Division on records. The Joy Division records, for example, Unknown Pleasures here, Closer over there, they're Martin Hannett performances, or Martin Hannett paintings of Joy Division performances, and they're very different to the Joy Division on stage. Joy Division on stage was an aggressive, spiky, loud rock beast. And when you listen to the live albums by Joy Division, Preston, Les Bange Douche, and or Paris, I probably should have said because it's easy to pronounce that. And the other one, which was recorded in, I think, in Eindhoven, it's a loud, raw, serrated edge, kind of almost Stooges level of aggression in those performances. The album's very different, icy, cold, aloof, distanced, far more mature than the live performances. So live Joy Division was something that most people never got to hear. And by the way, if you were 19 when you saw Joy Division in 1980, you would be at least 60 now, if not older than that, 61, 62 maybe. It is a very long time ago, 41 years since Joy Division came to an end. So the vast majority of people that see Peter Hook and the Light performing Joy Division songs have never seen Joy Division. And what you're getting is almost a recreation or a fragment, a memory of what once was. And by the way, having seen the Light a number of times, what I will say first and foremost about them is they put on a great show. They play long shows, they play deep cuts. The band clearly very proud of the material and proud of their ability to replicate the albums on stage. I never thought in my lifetime I'd get to see any member of New Order play songs like Face Up or Turn the Heater On, or Pass Over, or anything like that. When I came to be a New Order fan in 1987 to 1989, New Order had practically just ended. They disappeared, and they were never going to be seen again. That's what the rumours were telling us in 1989 after the Reading show. New Order were gone. Joy Division were gone. There were only ever going to be memories. So I thought I'd never stand in a room and watch a member of New Order play any New Order songs, let alone have two bands touring pretty much concurrently playing huge sets of Joy Division and New Order material. So the first tour which happened was the Unknown Pleasures 30th anniversary kind of Joy Division celebration tour in 2010 through to 2011. And there was a, first and foremost, I think the Light released an EP called 1102 2011, which was recorded in 2011, and it features studio recordings by Peter Hook and the Light of a number of Joy Division tracks: Atmosphere, Pictures in My Mind, New Dawn Fades, and Insight. Rowetta sang vocals on Atmosphere, New Dawn Fades, and Insight. I don't think her voice particularly suits those songs, but that's up to the Light. And a previously unreleased Joy Division original called Pictures in My Mind, which the band had played at rehearsal, and I think they played at a couple of shows. This EP features the studio recordings by the Light, instrumental versions of the tracks, but also vocals. So if you want to hear them, there's 12 songs on that EP. And then there was the first live album that was released, which is the Light performing Unknown Pleasures live at the Goodwood Festival on Sunday the 15th of August 2010. This, like a lot of the live albums you can buy from a website called Live Here Now, they're about £15 or £20 each. Live at Goodwood is a double CD, and it features a recording of the Light performing both the Soundcheck on disc 1 and some Joy Division material, and then Unknown Pleasures with an orchestra, or well, all of Unknown Pleasures apart from one song on, I think, disc 2. And it sounds really good, but it is, and I think even Hooky said this in an interview with Mark Radcliffe. He says he's become his own tribute act, and that's not necessarily a problem, because a lot of bands become their own tribute acts. There's not many bands that only tour on the back of new albums. I think Depeche Mode might be the only one that I can really think of. Everyone else is playing sets of material as and when they feel like it, and not necessarily linked to new album releases. Whereas what I found perhaps most frustrating about being a fan of Peter Hook after he left New Order is that apart from Freebase, there has not been one album of new studio material that's been released since he left the group. There's been an EP of cover versions. There was a 10-inch that was released with the book, which I think was about £400 in a super deluxe edition, and features tracks with names like Elijah and Later Than You Think, which sounds oddly like re-recordings and rearrangements of old New Order songs. But aside from the Freebase album, Hooky's new studio releases have been guest appearances on other bands. And I'm quite frustrated by that. I would love to hear new material, because I think you only get old once. And Steve Van Sant, who, by the way, is in Bruce Springsteen's band, said very recently that there's a new genre which is rising, which is called wisdom art, which is the music that could only be made by people now that they're older and more experienced. So, for example, in 1980, even Elvis, although he was dead, he would have been no more than about 48, 49. So rock never got a chance to grow old. It never got a chance to give you a kind of like an idea of, well, what's it like to be an old person making music? What's it like to be 75, 80? And what's it like to make music that charts your path through life at that age? And I'm absolutely fascinated to hear, what wisdom art would sound like. But for a lot of acts of that age and that vintage, we don't get the opportunity to hear the wisdom art, because we only want to hear the songs that were recorded half a lifetime ago, 40 years ago. It's really frustrating. I would love to hear music made by old people that's brilliant now. Leonard Cohen did it, David Bowie did it. I'd love to hear Peter Hook doing it. I'd love to hear more studio material by David Gilmour, Roger Waters, Ringo Starr. All right, maybe not Ringo Starr, but people of advancing years, and go, well, this is where we are now, because the fans are getting older. I don't listen to music to remind me of what it was like 40 years ago. I don't have nostalgia for a time that never existed, as Jello Biafra sang. I'm really interested in music helping me navigate my way through the day-to-day life of now. What is it to be my age now, this year, in this part of the world? So much as I love the old stuff, I'm really interested in new stuff by old bands. And not having new studio material can be quite frustrating, because there's only so many times I can listen to the old songs before I think I've heard every possible permutation of the old songs now. So 2010, the 30th anniversary of Ian Curtis's death and the end of Joy Division, was marked by the Unknown Pleasures tour, with The Light, which featured most members of Hookie's other band, Monaco, as well as a couple of other new members, including his son Jack on bass. Toured, and they played long, deep sets, long, deep cuts, lots of really unusual stuff. They released the Live at Goodwood album. They also released Live in Australia, on, I think, Pylon Records, which features 4 songs from the early part of the band's career. Unknown Pleasures, mostly in full, if not completely in full, and then Transmission and Love Will Tear Us Apart as the encore. And what you'll see there, if you look in the background, is they're playing underneath a backdrop of the traditional cover CP, I think it's 1979 or something like that, the Starfield Pulsar kind of thing, which is on the cover of Unknown Pleasures. But the poster that they have does not feature the unknown. It doesn't feature the name Joy Division on it at all. In fact, hang on, I'll get my DVD out and I'll show. So there was a couple of DVDs that were released around about the same time. An Evening of Unknown Pleasures, Peter Hook in conversation with Howard Marks there, featuring the same image, this time not quite the same, it's given a gold tint to it. And then also Peter Hook and the Light performed Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures and Closer. Now if you look at that image, that's very clearly, that's Joy Division. If you're looking at it in a hurry and you're not really thinking, that's Joy Division, it's meant to inspire that thought of Joy Division to you. Although the word Joy Division isn't necessarily on there, although it is actually in really small letters, and the same way on the back of the DVD it features the same photograph from the sleeve art of the Closer album on there. And I think what we'll see, and I've got a number of other artifacts to show you, is that the visual identity of Peter Hook and the Light was very, very close to New Order and Joy Division, to the point that I think that was one of the big kind of stumbling blocks that there was in the court case. So 2010 to 2011 was the tour of Unknown Pleasures, and then 2012 saw the tour of Closer, the last Joy Division album. So Hookie released in, I think, 2017, I think it was, Unknown Pleasures live in Dublin, with that sleeve art. And here I have to get a little bit boring around, but necessarily boring, around copyright and cover art. So if you look at that and you look at that, those two are clearly meant. This here is clearly meant to evoke that. It's like this has been flattened into that. So you've got that same centrally placed white wireframe image in a black thing, and it kind of looks a little bit unusual and a little bit techy. Although it clearly says Peter Hook and the Light, the two are meant to inspire each other. Now, if you saw this in a shop without the word Peter Hook on it, you'd be going, someone ripping off Joy Division. Although clearly you've got that. So, and I understand, being a former member of Joy Division, you completely should have a sense of ownership and a sense of pride in the visual art. Go, well, that's as much my art as anybody else's. But if you're not the actual band trading under the actual name, there is a court case, which is, I think, happened in about 1978, which was between the Morning Star and the Daily Star newspapers. The Morning Star was that famous communist mouthpiece that sold probably about 112 copies every day to comrades of a particularly strong left-wing persuasion. The newspaper group, I think it was the Express Group, wanted to launch a new daily newspaper called the Daily Star. It went to court, and the judge ruled that the content and shape of those two papers was so manifestly different that it couldn't be mistaken by anybody else to be the same paper under a different name. There is a theory, and I think the exact word that they use is, it's called a moron in a hurry. Would a moron in a hurry mistake this for that? And the answer is probably. There's a very good chance of it. I don't want to underestimate the cognitive abilities of a moron in a hurry, but if you're a moron in a hurry and you saw that and you saw this, you'd think the two were very distinctly related and might possibly come from the same brand or manufacturer. And this is where it gets into things like ownership of brand names. So earlier on, when I mentioned Monster Claws, If you're familiar with a British corn-based snack called Monster Munch looks very much like Monster Claus. Monster Claus is manufactured by Aldi, and it's probably about 1% different to prevent it going to court from Monster Munch. Although, to be honest, you eat them, they feel the same things. I'm going to eat this later on as proof, and if it doesn't taste like roast beef flavoured Monster Munch, I'm going to tell you. But roast beef flavoured Monster Claus, basically, if you close your eyes, you can't tell the difference between the two. In the same way that if you're a fan of Kraftwerk, when you look at the posters for former Kraftwerk members, Karl Bartos, for example, Wolfgang Flür, when they put posters up advertising their performances, the words Kraftwerk can't be used on the posters. There can be a reference to Kraftwerk. So, for example, Wolfgang Flür's posters regard him as ex-KW, because then you can tell that he's ex a band called KW, Kraftwerk, but it has to be no more than 60% of the size of his name on the poster, and his poster has to be big enough, and he can't use any Kraftwerk imagery. There's a photograph of Wolfgang Flür as a member of Kraftwerk that's been highly stylised, that's used as the posters, and that is specifically a contractual guideline so that people can't mistake a Wolfgang Flür poster for an advertisement for a Kraftwerk performance, because he's not in Kraftwerk, in the same way that Karl Bartos, formerly of Kraftwerk, can't put the words Kraftwerk on his gig posters. When I saw him play live in 2005, the tagline was "The Robot Returns," which was in the same font as Kraftwerk, but there was no mention of Kraftwerk on there at all. It was just "The Robot Returns." So if you're familiar with the band, you'll be familiar with the fact that yes, Karl Bartos was actually a robot. And then, of course, that ties into the similarity that you've got between this release by Joy Division and this release by Peter Hook and the like, is the two do look quite similar when you look at them. They're very clearly, birds of a feather. And let's take another example. We'll have it here. Is Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, his greatest hits album, Flickering Flame. If you look at that, then you can clearly see there's a pig on there that's made out of bricks. That's a clear reference to Pink Floyd, even though there's no Pink Floyd material or no songs released by Pink Floyd on here. And on his live album, In the Flesh, you can clearly see that there's an eclipse of the moon and a pig on there, again tying in with the trademarks and the ideas and the imagery which you would associate with that particular band. Let's look at some t-shirts now. Just to go down this visual rabbit hole again. This, if you didn't know any better, you go, that's a Pink Floyd t-shirt. Well, it isn't. It is Roger Waters performing Dark Side of the Moon live in 2006, but it's clearly evocative and reminiscent of the cover of Dark Side of the Moon. And this one here, this is the t-shirt from Roger Waters performing Dark Side of the Moon live in 2008. And again, that's evocative of the cover of Dark Side of the Moon. It's clearly intended to tell you that it's a Pink Floyd related thing there. He's performing Dark Side of the Moon live. It's also, I think, on the inner tray of, or at least an adaptation of a stained glass window that's on the inner tray of the 30th anniversary version of Dark Side of the Moon. Now in 2009 to 2000, and I think it was 2013, I think, when Roger toured The Wall, that's one of his t-shirts. That looks really, really like a Pink Floyd t-shirt. If you opened up the gatefold sleeve to the Wall album, you'd look at that and you'd go, yep, same band, same person, even though it's very clearly tells you that it's Roger Waters. And this one as well, again, that looks very much like a Pink Floyd kind of t-shirt. It relies upon Pink Floyd imagery, the crossed hammers, the use of pigs, the use of the moon, the use of the prism, the imagery, the fonts, the sizes. It's all designed to remind you of what it is. And it becomes a very, very blurry line there between going, so this is the thing, and this is not the thing, and it becomes really fuzzy at the edges. And I think both Roger Waters and I think Peter Hook's imagery is very, very reminiscent of the original band, so much so that it could confuse people. And this was one of the things that happened. There was a court case where Peter Hook sued New Order for approximately £2.3 million. There was a settlement agreement. The terms of that settlement haven't been fully disclosed, but I think in the statement that came out from New Order, what they said is it was one of the areas of dispute was Hook's use of various New Order and Joy Division assets on merchandising and promotion by his new band. And by assets, they meant very clearly that the physical imagery that was on the cover of the records, that was clearly designed to evoke a similarity and to go, I know exactly what that is. That is that band. And the so let's look at the 2012 album. Peter Hook was touring Closer, doing fantastic sets, long sets, very faithful. Clearly coming out. There's the cover of the live album, Peter Hook and the Light, Closer, live in Manchester. And here's the cover of the Closer album. These are very, very clearly, I think, pictures of the same gravestone in the same cemetery in the same town in Italy. They're different shots, but if you looked at that and you looked at that, you couldn't tell that that wasn't just an outtake from the same sessions as this. And then if you open the the inside, you've got there the grave imagery and similar things like that. These came out in 2017, I think, before the court settlement occurred. And what you'd do is you'd look at that and you go, that's very if that's not Joy Division, someone's really, really running very, very close to the edge of it. Obviously, it's a former member of Joy Division performing a live album of a Joy Division record played live in its entirety, but those are very, very close indeed. And I can understand why the court case got a little bit hairy. You could look at that, and if you were a moron in a hurry, you might go, yeah, Joy Division, understand completely and utterly. You can look at, for example, the Movement album. So Peter Hook and the Light played Movement of Power, Corruption and Lies live in 2013 and 2014. I saw one of those shows. It was absolutely fantastic, by the way. Brilliant show. Cannot recommend seeing him enough if you like New Order or Joy Division. He does really great shows, 3-hour shows. Does an opening set of either New Order or Joy Division material, and then plays the other bands as well. So you get more than your money's worth there. But if you look at the Factory CD 50 1981, New Order, Movement there, and Peter Hook and the Light, which is Movement tour live in Dublin 2013. These are clearly evocative of each other. They've got the blue dots on there, they've got the lines on there, they've got the black text that's centered. You couldn't look at those two and go, two completely different bands, nothing to do with each other. These are very clearly designed to evoke memories of this band here, which obviously Peter Hook is no longer a member of. Now, the court cases that we've got, which tie around the Evening Star and the Morning Star, was the ruling was that they had to trade upon the goodwill, the brand reputation that existed. So Monster Claws clearly trading on the goodwill and brand reputation of Monster Munch, but considerably cheaper. Peter Hook here clearly evoking the brand of New Order and their known and associated imagery, if not actually their name. You could argue that there's misrepresentation there, although the text is pretty big on here to tell you that it definitely isn't New Order. If you weren't paying attention or you couldn't read English, for example, you could look at those two and go, same thing. You really, really could. And then there's a risk, and this is where the court cases around brand reputation and a theory of passing off comes in, is around the damage to the goodwill. Is going, would the goodwill generated by the work which has been created by New Order be damaged by Peter Hook and the Light by using and appropriating very, very similar stylistic choices and characteristics that are associated with the other band? I don't think the goodwill would be damaged, apart from the fact that you'd be expecting to see New Order, perhaps, and you weren't. You were seeing Peter Hook and the Light, although all of the typography, the text that's on there is very, very clearly telling you that you're not seeing New Order. In all the other ways, it's meant to remind you of the thing that perhaps it isn't, but it's very similar to. Now, this sounds like I'm giving him a kicking. I'm not, actually, despite what you may have heard, read, or smoked. But there is a lot of similar kind of things between the various imagery and merchandising. So, for example, in 2016, he toured the Joy Division album Substance. There is a Peter Hook tour T-shirt, and here is the Joy Division album Substance, which features, oddly enough, you look at that and you go, very, very, very similar fonts there. Those two look like they're the same thing. If you didn't know any better, you go, yes, that's exactly the same. And then, of course, the the lights logo itself on the t-shirt. Again, very, very similar, dark grey and a kind of fluorescent green that's on there. So in terms of appropriating the imagery, it's very, very close to it indeed. In fact, whoever it is who is the graphic designer, I would go, my God, you've done a fantastic job of replicating that without it actually being it. Although obviously you look at the Substance tour, here's the New Order type t-shirt that he released, and there's the New Order record itself. Very, very similar, big text, near enough the same font, got a bar underneath it, and then the title plus the so very, very reminiscent of the original. And you could argue, if you were a lawyer, that it's designed to create, if not confusion, then a similarity around that. Now, as I've said before, 2013 to 2014, Hooky was touring the album Movement and Power, Corruption and Lies. As you will probably have noticed, here's a t-shirt which features the information from the first song on Power, Corruption and Lies. Track 1, that's the catalogue number, Factory 75. Factory 75 there. Side 1, although you only have one side on a CD. Track 1, Age of Consent. And then the other t-shirt, which we've got, the Dreams Never End t-shirt, features this here. It's clearly designed to remind you of what it was. And if you look at that versus this, those colours are not an accident. They are a choice and they are a design. And it's not a criticism. I completely understand. If you've been working in a band for 30 years, you're very, very proud of that band. You feel like you've got a degree of ownership. You would look at, the artwork that you've got on the cover of Power, Corruption and Lies and go, I'm, 25% of that, if not more. And that cover art, that's me. As much as anybody else, it's me. But then if you put that cover art onto a t-shirt, and here's the Power, Corruption and Lies tour shirt here, you wouldn't know until you looked at the back and it said Peter Hook and the Light performing in very small letters, New Order's Power, Corruption and Lies and Movement. You wouldn't know that's not a New Order t-shirt. Most people haven't got enough bandwidth in their brains to remember the difference between Peter Hook and New Order, or Roger Waters and Pink Floyd, or Karl Bartos and Kraftwerk necessarily. It would be one of those things where people would go, yep, seems legit. And band lineups change substantially over time. So if the bass player is the only one that remains, it would be no different from Napalm Death, no different from the second reunion version of Pop Leads itself, which only shared one member with the previous versions of the band. In fact, the only member of Pink Floyd who was in Pink Floyd at their last show, or more correctly, the only person that's played on every Pink Floyd album is Nick Mason. So you'd be looking at, let's say, the last Pink Floyd album, The Division Bell, or the Momentary Lapse of Reason, that only has Nick and David playing on it. Only Nick plays on Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And would you go, is that not New Order? Is that not Pink Floyd? Are you not entertained? So, the line becomes really, really fuzzy around where it belongs and who is who. So the Power, Corruption and Lies tour, which took place, by the way, 2013 to 2014. Brilliant, by the way. If you want a great live version of Power, Corruption and Lies and Movement, go and buy these albums. But you look at those are very clearly photographs of the same painting that have been treated and presented in a slightly different way. They look very, very similar. They could actually generate confusion. And I should point out, I'm not telling you not to buy these. These are really good albums. The reproductions of the New Order shows, the Joy Division shows, they're very faithful. They're done with love and passion, and the shows are fantastic, and they are long, and I recommend them completely. But they really, really look like New Order things. And there's a couple of other kind of things which I'm going to mention. 2014 and 2015, Hooky played the Brotherhood and Lowlife albums. So he released the Live at Hebden Bridge box set, which features, oddly enough, a number of CDs here. And you look at the typography choices that we've got for those. That's Unknown Pleasures Live at Goodwood, which has been repackaged, by the way, very clearly similar black and white colour choices to Unknown Pleasures. This is Unknown Pleasures and Closer, which again takes the dominant colour from the Closer photograph and reflects that in those kind of colour choices. These colour choices, they are not that far removed from these. You know, you could look at those and go, yep, same guy, same thing. You know, very much so. And this one here, Low Life and Brotherhood, kind of follows the cover art that you've got on there. That same kind of dominant colour scheme, large wadges of white with black and grey that's on there. And the Low Life T-shirt, by the way, I should point out, also features. Hang on a second. Looks very, very similar here to although you can't really see it there, the Low Life Tour Peter Hook shirt features the same kind of graphic and design as you've got on the album when you open up the sleeve, and then there's the text that's on there. It's not necessarily designed to confuse, but the practical effect it has is that it probably does confuse, actually. And I should point out, absolutely great live shows, fantastic live shows. Do go and see them. In 2015, the 35th anniversary, there was the live show at Macclesfield, which resulted in the live album. So this is Permanence, and the DVD that was released recently. So this is Permanent. I'd like to say hello to Michael Hasty, who I know who appears in the audience shots of these, and also James, my friend. Hello, James, Shake Dog Shake, who's in the crowd shots for this as well. But this takes its title from the Book of Joy Division lyrics. So this is Permanence by Ian Curtis. It's very close to the original, let's put it that way. 2016, 2017 saw Hook and the Light performing the album Substance by New Order and Joy Division, and here is the Live Here Now release of the show, which is recorded at the Manchester Apollo. Let's quickly dig out the Joy Division one, in case, for those of you of short memories, those shades of green are not an accident. But as I've said before, absolutely great shows. Do recommend this recording. And 2017 saw the live at Camden, it's the Roundhouse actually, live at the Roundhouse, performing the opening set of New Order's Movement plus Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures and Closer. I was at this show. It was really good, but I didn't feel entirely comfortable watching a set of Joy Division material. It felt like watching, the guitarist from The Doors singing all the Doors songs, or when Roger Waters does nothing but Pink Floyd songs all night long. I mean, they're great songs, absolutely love them, brilliant songs, well played, well performed, but I want to hear something new. I think if you're an artist that's not moving, you're not moving, and you're not moving people anymore. And I think new stuff is absolutely where it is at. I will also point out, by the way, I've shown you the Low Life T-shirt. Here's another Low Life T-shirt here from the Low Life tour. I'd also like to point out this record sleeve here. It looks very, very similar to that. So when the argument was all around the use of various band assets, imagery and so on and so forth, there was a risk of confusion between the two separate acts. And obviously in the set lists, Hooky wasn't playing anything that was under 30 years old in many, many instances. When he did the Republic album, it was nothing under 25 years old. But, when I saw him in 2017, every song that he played was older than my partner, which was a strange and unusual experience to have. And in 2018, I saw the Republic and Technique show at the Coco it's not Coco, it was at the Camden Electro Ballroom, because there was a problem with Coco. But if you look at the sleeve to that there, what you've got a circle with a load of bubbles in it, and you've got performances of Peter Hook and the Light performing the Technique and Republic albums. Does an absolutely great job of them, by the way. They sound absolutely brilliant. But you look at the artwork that you've got there, and it really, really reminds me of the artwork that you've got on this T-shirt here, which if it didn't have the words Peter Hook and the Light on, you could go, it's a New Order T-shirt. And if you look at the artwork that we've got specifically for Republic, you've got the limited edition there with a circular image of effectively, like an orange kind of life boat boy thing, but then also it's very, very similar to this artwork that we've got here on the back of the Ruined in a Day single. I really understand why there's that sense of ownership over the imagery and going, well, this is my band as much as anybody else's, and I completely understand why he's taken the approach that perhaps he's maybe been manoeuvred out of being a major player in a band that he clearly is very, very proud of, and a body of work he's very, very proud of. But there is a point where you go, legally, this is really close to the edge of what's not confusing and blurring the borderlines between that band and another band. Um, what I will say, and it sounds like I'm being critical, I'm absolutely not. I'm just trying to clarify, I think, and perhaps add a bit of insight into things around copyright law, passing off, consumer confusion, around court cases that we've got around things like the differences between various brands and how people can confuse Monster Claws for Monster Munch. And every time I pick them up, I go, oh God, I'm going to eat you soon. It's difficult. And obviously, it's been very, very painful for an awful lot of people, to see a band that you love tear itself into pieces, to have very, very public bickering between former members, to have the mystery kind of smashed a little bit. I don't really want to know what's going on with the people who are in the various bands. I just want to hear fantastic music. And if they can't get on, so be it. But I'd rather everybody did. Although that makes me sound an awful lot like the Joker in Batman, where he goes, can't everyone just get along? Well, the answer is no. Sometimes people need to be and have to be captains of their own ships, as opposed to being on other ships going in other directions. The situation that we've got now, New Order release records, they play live, they do good shows. They're very different shows to the Peter Hook ones. Peter Hook plays fantastic live shows. You really get your money's worth there. They're long shows, deep cuts, songs that I never thought I'd hear play live. I never thought I'd hear, Face Up, or Touched by the Hand of God, or Turn the Heater On, or things like that. I never thought I'd see those songs played live by any member of New Order. I never thought I'd get to see Mr. Disco played live by a member of New Order, because that band died when I was at school, and they never played Mr. Disco again. So if you're a fan of New Order and you want to see and experience a different type of New Order, the more ramshackle version, I think, although the lights are slick and well rehearsed and they put together a really good show. But in the 80s, they would play smaller venues, they play more random set lists, they play more deep cuts. If you want an experience that's kind of like that, go and see The Light. If you want to see a version of of New Order songs that's played by New Order, or most of New Order, 4/5 of New Order, so to speak, in bigger venues, it's perhaps a little bit slicker, a little bit more polished, with a set list that perhaps doesn't change quite so much. Go and see New Order. They're both really good bands in different ways, with different personalities and different elements. Much like if you see David Gilmour and Roger Waters, Roger Waters live shows, very big on Pink Floyd songs, very big on the big stadium experience, the lasers, the triangles, the pyramids, the prisms, the pigs, all that stuff. The David Gilmour show, very different. The set lists go further into deep cuts, and it's all about the music. It's not necessarily about the spectacle and the prism and all that stuff that goes with it. What I'm basically saying is go and see both the bands. If you love a band and you want to, and they're playing near you, go see them. We've had nearly 2 years of not going to see bands, and God, I've missed it. But also, I am sympathetic to both sides of this particular dispute. I understand completely why both sides feel that they're right, and I'm just trying to kind of work my way through that. I think perhaps saying so many things in public didn't do one side of that much favour in terms of public opinion. My partner is just like, he's always moaning and he's always playing old songs. And whether that's true or not, that's a perception that someone who's relatively uninformed and doesn't really like the band feel. And that's not really the place you want to be in, is it? It's a shame. But the past is a forgotten country. The future is where we're going to be spending the rest of our lives. I wish both those bands success in the future going forward in what they do. And hopefully I will get to see both of them again at some point. I have no idea whether this is what I was planning to say when I started off. I was hoping to do perhaps something where I was talking about, brands and identities and imagery and trademarking and all that type of stuff. I've barely touched upon it, really. It's been a really strange experience watching those two bands and those two identities have arguments in public. I'm glad that it's settled. I understand that nobody is particularly happy about this, but if there's a middle ground where you can live with it and everyone else can live with it, then that's probably the best case it is. I have been divorced in my life. Obviously, the fate of a band and the public reputation of it has not been the subject of my particular divorce, but there was a legal thing that happened. There was a division of the assets. There was things that were said that weren't true about me, which I felt very, very strongly about. But that's all in the past now, and I can really understand why sometimes people just can't reach a middle ground where they can all go forward into the future. What we do have, though, we have the records, we have the songs, we have the live shows. Let's enjoy those, because there will come a time when there aren't any more shows, there aren't any more records, there aren't any more songs. I don't want to look back upon those times and go, really wish I'd done more shows, really wish I bought more records, which probably explains why I went to so many shows before COVID hit. Right, that's episode 151. The next time I talk about any of the related things, I am going to be talking about New Order's Music Complete album, released in 2015, the first album made by the new lineup of the band. Whether it's New Order or not, I'll let you make that decision. But I like it. I think it's a good record, and I think all the Peter Hook live albums, they're really good live albums, and I recommend you listening to them if you can. I'll post some links to some live Hooky footage down there so you can see just how good they are. They are really good live. Go see them. And that's where I'm going to wrap up. Thank you and bye.